All right, looks like we're live. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the launch of Christina Myers' debut novel, The List of Last Chances. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Malaika, and I am the Marketing and Promotions Coordinator here at Caitlin Press. Caitlin Press, as I'm sure many of you already know, is an independent Canadian publisher located on the Sunshine Coast in British Columbia. We publish culturally significant books, including fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. Caitlin Press is also home of Dagger Editions, an imprint for the voices of queer women identifying writers. I'd like to acknowledge the support that Caitlin Press receives from the Government of Canada and the British Columbia Arts Council through the Canada Book Fund as a small independent publisher. I would also like to say a big thank you to Western Sky Books in Port Coquitlam, where you can purchase signed copies of Christina's book. And Tamara from Western Sky is actually with us tonight. So hi, Tamara. And of course, you can buy books right now or during the event. We highly encourage that. All you need to do is click on the green button at the bottom of your screen. I'd like to acknowledge that this event, although it's virtual, does take place on the land of Indigenous peoples. Caitlin Press is located in Half Moon Bay on the traditional territories of the Squamish, Sechelt, Sliamon, and Kalahousie First Nations. I work remotely from Montreal, which is on the traditional unceded territories of the Kanien'kehá:ka. Where are you joining from? You can let us know in the chat. All right, so just a bit more housekeeping before we get going and as people trickle into the room. So the audience and the video mic are not active. We are recording and it will be available on YouTube after the event. So there's the chat column and all of the users can see the chat. However, the chat is not recorded to YouTube. If you are on a desktop and you would like to hide the chat, simply put your mic in the upper right-hand corner of the chat and a little down arrow will pop up. So just click on that down arrow and you'll be able to hide the chat. So we highly encourage you to ask questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, you can just click on the little ask a question button on the bottom of your screen. And then in the last few minutes of the launch, Christina will be happy to answer your questions. If there's a question that you really, really like and you want to make sure that, that we see it, you can just click on the question. You can click the button beside the question to vote for it. All right. So now that the housekeeping is done, I am so excited to introduce tonight's host, the wonderful J.J. Lee. So J.J. Lee mentors the nonfiction workshop at the Writers Studio program at SFU. His memoir, The Measure of a Man, The Story of a Father, a Son, and a Suit, was a finalist for the Governor General's Hillary Weston Writers Trust and the Charles Taylor Prizes for Nonfiction. His personal essays and memoir pieces have appeared in Elle Canada, Monte Cristo, Nouveau magazines, and CBC Radio. So I am going to bring J.J. Lee up to the screen.
Hello.
Take it away, JJ.
Thank you, Malaika. I appreciate it. Thank you for the intro. I just want to say I'm coming from Kittiite territory, and I also want to mention how thankful I am to be asked by Christina to play the role of host because Christina works from a perspective and from a grounding that deals with diverse and feminist characters, topics, and themes. So I was really, really touched when she reached out to me to talk and spend some time with her and help her celebrate the launch of her novel. So I just want to say I'm very grateful for that opportunity. So thank you, Christina. Christina Myers is a former journalist, a freelance writer and editor. She is the editor of the BC best-selling nonfiction collection, Big: Stories About Life in Plus-Size Bodies. Her work has appeared in anthologies, newspapers, and magazines, and online. And she's a fan of red lipstick and dresses with big skirts and deep pockets. And she juggles parenthood and creative work from her home outside Vancouver, BC. Everyone, through the chat, just in your home, please give a big welcome to the author of the List of Last Chances, Christina Myers. Congratulations, Christina.
Thank you. I'm clapping for myself now.
No, it's lovely. Thank you for having me join you in this wonderful event. I would have been here anyway, so you didn't have to do that.
Thank you so much.
Well, let's get into it. I guess, I'm definitely going to keep my eye out for your questions. So please feel free to begin asking any questions that you want. I know there are a lot of familiar faces in the list of people that are here with us this evening, and there are a lot of friends and actually a lot of writers. So I think we might be talking a little bit of business tonight, right?
So, yeah.
So why don't we get into it? I do have because I don't have this experience, which is, tell us about the writing journey that led you to this moment. I mean, this is the novel part of your journey now. Like, you had your anthology part, and you know what I mean? So can you tell me about getting here? And I think this was the goal, was it not?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I sort of started out doing creative work, moving away from journalism and into creative work, I moved right into sort of creative nonfiction, which, of course, sort of overlaps with journalism half the time anyways. And in the back of my head, I always thought, oh, fiction will be fun sort of someday. And I wanted to say it's particularly, you were saying you appreciated being invited to come tonight. It's special for me to have you here because, in fact, you were one of the, I think, very first people that I mentioned this project to. You probably won't remember it, but we were finishing up our year at TWS. For anybody who doesn't know, I was one of JJ's students in his group in TWS 2015. Hello, all my TWS friends. And at the end of that year, you do sort of a sit down, you talk about your projects. And, you were sort of asking me about these various things that I had been working on at the time. And some of them have come to fruition since. And some of them, of course, haven't. Like all writers, we have our files of things that don't happen. And I said, I've got this project, it's this novel. And we sort of kept coming back to the creative nonfiction and I kept coming back to the novel. And I wasn't really sure if it would ever happen, but it did. And I think one of the things that I've learned the most in the last couple of years is that these things always feel from the outside like they're overnight. And that they sort of, you have a spark of inspiration and off you go and you do it. And it did start with a spark of inspiration, but then all of the work and all the steps and all of the people that come in and support that. So, for example, if Caitlin Press hadn't backed this, we wouldn't be here right now. If the amazing team at Caitlin hadn't been part of it, they brought in John Gold to be my developmental editor, substantive editor on it. And he just did great work with it. And the team there is wonderful. I'm not sure how many of them are on the line, but, thank you to all of them for what they did. And it's never a solo effort, right? You have the support in the community and the people. Lynn is on the line here somewhere. Lynn is sort of my writing partner, and she's listened to me do all sorts of complaining over the years about this and that. And then you have people in the community like Tamara at Western Sky Books, who's been a partner for my work in so many ways. We do a reading series. So you sort of have this whole community around a project. Even though it's solitary work, it isn't really solitary work. It's really group work that happens from the inspiration that you get from other writers and from the people who say, "Oh yeah, keep going. I know you're frustrated today, but keep going." And then a publisher says, "Yeah, keep going. We'll back you on this one." And the list could go on. Canada Council of the Arts and everybody that gets in on these things, but yeah, it's still amazing to me that it happened. I mean, with COVID, it could have derailed completely. It was in the pipeline before that, but here we are. And upshot, COVID, we get to, one of my oldest friends who now lives back east is on the line. Hi, Stacey. My mom's here, like all of these things that you can't do in normal times. So it's sort of a long roundabout answer to that one. But yeah, it's really exciting that it's here and it's alive now. So.
Well, congratulations. It is incredible. I'm so happy for you. Well, why don't we sort of dive into, we don't want to give too much away, right? Because it's a very exciting book. And so why don't we, I was a bit worried about how to ask these questions without giving away too much. And we want to kind of do the front part and leave the rest for everyone else to figure out themselves. But in the broadest strokes, what's the story? What's the story that you wanted to tell?
So the story that initially came to me was the concept of two women being stuck together, doing things they didn't want to do, and both of them discovering new things out of that. So finding a second chance out of that, finding an unexpected friendship out of that. And that was the initial vision, was these two characters who sometimes are kind of unlikable. They're not always the characters that you're 100% rooting for. And so that was the initial sort of, I guess, the seed of it. And the whole sort of story came together very quickly after I sort of had the two of them. And in all writing experiences up till now, I've been a total pantser. Like, I just sit down and, the night before the essays due, sit down and write it. And this was the opposite. I plotted the whole thing and had, I hate to say it, like, I had a spreadsheet. It's like sort of, I don't know, that's taboo. Writers are not supposed to have spreadsheet. I had a spreadsheet of scenes. And it just happened to work for this project. I don't know if another future project will work that way, but yeah. So that was how it sort of started. Was the idea of, I think we undervalue and dismiss female friendships often, and particularly we undervalue and dismiss female friendships that are different ages, right? We think that our friendships have to be, the same age, or that we're in the same stage of life, and I think the opposite is actually true.
Oh, that's terrific. And of course, one half of that intergenerational female friendship that arises, it begins with Ruthie, our narrator and our main character. And I'm really hoping you can tell us a bit more about that voice that we spend so much time with. And is it really you?
Is it really me? It's so funny, because I often say, people ask, oh, are there things in the story that are true? Well, of course there's things in the story that are true, right? Fiction is where we bury the skeletons that we can't talk about in our nonfiction. But sometimes they're good skeletons. They're just things that we just want to write about and have some creative license with. Is Ruthie me? And going back to your last question, I realized I didn't really answer it. So for anybody who doesn't know exactly what the story is about, it's about two women who do get thrown together, and they have to cross the country, and neither of them want to, and they do it by road trip. But Ruthie, is Ruthie me? At times, yeah. I mean, sometimes she's sort of, she can be a little bit uptight, and she has in her mind how things in the world are supposed to go. Ruthie's probably more me, kind of about age 25. And parts of Kay, I think, are me, or sort of who I would maybe hope to be. My age is kind of in between those two characters. I'm not really either of them. And one of the things in the story that I like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that I like a thing in my own story, but one of the things that I like in the story is that there's a little bit of flipping around of the roles. So we often think, oh, young people are going to be, they're just so vibrant and wild, and they're off for any adventure, and they're open-minded and all of that. And in this case, it's the other way around. Kay, who's the older character, is often like, the one who's sort of poking her into fun and getting Ruthie to carry on. So, I think Ruthie's like a lot of young women who grow up with an idea of what it means to be, to do what's the next right thing that I'm supposed to do. And she watches her friends and her sister and people around her, get married and have kids, and the 2.5 kids and the cat and that kind of thing. And she has to sort of wrestle with the realization that what the whole world wants is maybe not what she wants, which I think we all have to wrestle with that at some point. So I hope we all wrestle with that at some point.
And we find Ruthie in that really important moment of wrestling with that idea quite early on. Like it's kind of the launching pad, I suppose, for her adventure and her journey of self-discovery. I mean, it's really a road trip book, isn't it? And can you give us a reading of that moment? Yeah. Like, give us a piece of Ruthie's voice and the way she's thinking about her life, and whether it's going well or poorly. I would love to know that.
Absolutely. So this first reading, I sort of, I know there's people on the line who've already told me that they've read the whole book, but lots of people haven't. So we don't want to give away the whole 9 yards. So I've chosen readings that are from right kind of up front. And I chose this first reading because to me, it sort of shows a little bit of Ruthie reckoning with the fact that she has made some decisions along the way that have led to where she is, and that as a result, her life has to change. So some things have happened to her, and some things she has brought about, which I think that's how life goes for all of us, right? And that she's at a place where she has to make a change. And this is the scene that tells a little bit to the reader up front. So this is the beginning of chapter 3, and I'll just do a short reading from here. And normally I would sort of have it up on the screen so it looked like I was reading right at you, at the audience, but this is the first time I get to read out of the actual book. So I'm going to read out of the actual book. Okay. It took ages to fall asleep. I told myself it was nerves about meeting David's mother in the morning, but if I was being honest, it was only partly nerves. The real problem was that it was the first time in weeks I'd gone to sleep without being partially or fully bombed on a bottle or two of wine. I couldn't even recall falling asleep most nights lately, and when I woke up in the morning, I was always greeted with a series of clues as to how the night before had gone. Was I in pajamas or still dressed? Was I under a blanket with a pillow or just sprawled on the couch? Were there plates of half-eaten food or just empty glasses? Being stone cold sober made the process of falling asleep painful. It was impossible not to think of being in bed with Jack, feeling the warmth of his body nearby. He'd always fallen asleep easily, quickly. It seemed almost superhuman. He'd lie down, roll on his side, away from me, and less than a minute later, I'd hear his soft snoring. At first, it had seemed sweet, like a little boy falling off to sleep after a hard day of play. I had interpreted it as a show of his character, his good-natured approach to the world, his ability to let go of slights and hurts and not sit and simmer about them. The opposite of me, it had seemed. If someone cut me off in traffic, I was still pissed off 3 hours later while I told him about it over dinner. Jack just let everything roll off him. He'd shrug his shoulders, smile, and say, "Oh well, c'est la vie," and it was done. Sometimes I'd try talking to him to keep him awake. It felt like a good time to talk about shy, intimate things, that cozy bubble of warmth at bedtime with just a small bedside light on. It worked, sometimes, but he rarely had anything revelatory to tell me as I poked and pressed for his secrets. "What do you think about in the shower?" I'd ask. "What did you think when you first saw me? Where do you think we'll be in 10 years? What's your favorite thing to do in bed?" He'd answer with the simplest of responses and follow with his famous Jack shrug. "What are you looking for, Ruthie?" He'd say with a tone that landed somewhere between amused and irritated. "I don't have any secrets. What you see is what you get, babe." And then he'd roll over, and a minute later, the soft snuffle of his snore would be all that was left of the conversation. But he did have secrets after all, didn't he? I'd been right to poke and prod, to ask and wonder. There were huge parts of Jack I'd never known at all, despite my efforts. By 2 a.m, I'd tossed and turned for hours and hadn't gotten even close to sleep. I wanted to get up and have half a glass of wine, a full glass, 2 glasses. Instead, I got up and went to the washroom. Sitting on the toilet, I opened my phone, tapped the Facebook icon, and scrolled. There he was, Jack. Jackass Jack. The guy I thought I'd be with for the rest of my life, whose profile photo now included him, his flower shop girlfriend, and flower shop girlfriend's miniature dog. She was cute. The girl, not the dog, though of course the dog was cute as hell too. Flower shop girl was cuter than me by about 10 years, blonde, and seemingly possessed with that supernatural ability some girls have to do their hair and makeup without looking like they're dressed up for a Halloween party. What a bitch. I refused to think about the fact that every time I'd ever interacted with her, and I had many times, what with her owning the shop below our apartment, she'd been lovely. Not a fakey sort of sweet, but a genuine sweet. I'd once gone in to buy flowers for my client's birthday and left wishing that I was friends with the flower shop woman. They'd both duped me, hadn't they? Jack with his, what you see is what you get, and flower shop girlfriend with her kind, but obviously evil demeanor. As I scrolled through their photos from a recent trip to Cancun or Puerto Vallarta or some other amazing, magical place that Jack had never taken me to, I waited for the familiar rage to rise up. In fact, I welcomed it. I wanted it to build up, boil over, fill me with its anger and self-righteousness. It was a thing to hold on to roll around in my brain, to bite and chew on, to distract me from every other pressing and current worry. But it wasn't there this time. Maybe it didn't have enough wine fuel to get going. Instead of the familiar comfort of rage, I just felt so tired and sad that I wanted to weep, a thing I'd rarely permitted myself to indulge in. I finished in the bathroom, padded back to the couch in the dark living room, crawled under the blankets, set the phone on the coffee table, and let myself feel this new, strange sadness that didn't have any rage at its borders. It got bigger and bigger and bigger until I did start to weep, the kind of bawling that sounds like a howling, wretched animal. I cried so hard that I started to gasp for air. big gulps between whales, pressing my hands to my face. And I'll just quickly say, if you've read the description of the book and you haven't read it yet, it's described as being humorous and lighthearted. And I promise there is humor and lightheartedness after that. But of course, like real life, a lot of humor comes out of the hard times first. So that's a little bit about where Ruthie starts from. And I thought, I didn't really mention this online, but as a special treat, I asked my brother if he would come on and be part of the event tonight. And I'll just quickly introduce what he's going to do. So my brother, this is Dan Myers, and he's been a musician since, I don't know, about 7 years old, and he can play pretty much everything on the planet.
Hello.
It's true.
I don't know if that's true. Thank you.
I asked him to play a song, and I'll give a little bit of background on the song. So about a year ago this time, a musician that most of us know, I'm sure, John Prine, passed away due to COVID. And shortly before he died, a couple months before he died, he recorded this song. It was released after he passed away. And as soon as I heard it, it became sort of an instant favorite. I just loved it. And when I heard it, it made me think of the story. I don't want to say the names, but it made me think of some of the people in the story and about how our lives we think our lives are sort of little sections of time and memory and experiences and people, but really they're an accumulation, and we remember everything, and it all becomes part of us. So that's what this song is called. I Remember Everything by John Prine, and it worked out well. Dan is a John Prine fan, and so he learned the song, and now he's going to play it for us. So thank you, Dan.
I wanted to say thank you very much for asking me to be here. I remember everything. I've been down this road before. I remember every single tree, every single blade of grass was a special place for me. I remember every town and every hotel room and every song I ever sang on a guitar out of tune. And I remember everything, and things I can't forget. The way you turned and smiled on me on the night that we first met. And I remember every night your ocean eyes of blue. I miss you in the morning light, like roses miss the dew. I've been down this road before, alone as I can be, careful not to let my past go sneaking up on me. The future and my happiness, the regrets are very few. Sometimes a little tenderness is the best that I could do. And I remember everything, things I can't forget. Swimming pools of butterflies that slid right through my net. And I remember every night your ocean eyes of blue. How I miss you in the morning light, like roses miss the dew. How I miss you in the morning light, like roses miss the dew. I love you, Christina, and we're very proud of you.
Thanks. Now I'm going to get all weepy. Luckily, I think most of the people watching are people who already know us, so they know that we can get a little weepy sometimes. So thank you so much for doing that. And I did genuinely get weepy while I was listening to that. So thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll go on, I think, to another reading before I start this next reading. And this is going to be actually the final reading because I don't want to, actually, a couple people said in the chat, don't give away spoilers. Don't worry, I'm not going to. This is going to be the last reading. After that, we can do some questions. We didn't want to make things too long. We know people have done a lot of Zooming this year, so this is a quick and cozy. But before I read the next section, I'll just quickly say a couple things. Don't forget that there is the Ask a Question area. If you have a question you want to ask, I'm happy to hang out for as long after and chat. And I didn't say it at the beginning, but I wanted to say, and in case I forget to say it at the end, when I'm excited at the end, just huge thank you and gratitude to everybody who took the time out to be here. Some of you are on Newfoundland time, some of you are on Maritime time, some of you are coming in from the United States. The support for this project and the support for me over the last months, moons, years, all sorts of time has just been so astounding. And your notes in the last few weeks have been so wonderful to hear you. You know, the laughter or crying or whatever has occurred while you were reading it, and people sending one-word notes about particular scenes, the rock scene or the dolphin scene, and sending little notes, and we have a little chuckle about what those scenes are. It really, I say every time, oh, this is making me weepy, and perhaps it sounds like no one could get that weepy that many times, but I really do. So thank you to everyone who's here for listening tonight and for reading the book or ordering the book at the library or sharing the book online. Whether you ever buy the book or not, your support just means the world. So thank you to everybody who's here, in case I forget to say that at the end. So I'm going to read one more. Peggy at the Dolphins. It's fun. It's a fun one. Can you tell that I used to work selling sex toys? There's a story for another day. So I'm going to read another section. This is chapter 6, so it's still pretty close to the beginning. Oh, my mom is giving me heck for talking about the dolphin scene. All right, Mom. This is still pretty close to the beginning, and I want to read this. Again, it's just going to be sort of 2 pages here, very quick. But this introduces the list. Of course, the list of last chances suggests there might be a list. There is. I'm not going to read the list. Oh, and that was the other thing I meant to say in the little interlude there, aside from the thank you, was also thank you to Western Sky Books for being here and being part of this. You can order books from them. Those of you in the US, I know a few of you have reached out. There will be a release date in September. So hold tight, it's coming, and there will be an ebook coming as well. So thank you, Tamara, for being here. You have been a huge support just in so many ways and so many projects, not just this one. And I'm so grateful that our paths crossed when they did. So here's the next scene. And to give a little bit of a preface, they are sitting in a diner. They've crossed Confederation Bridge. So they're off PEI where they started. Anybody who's from that side of the country will be familiar with, I'm going to forget the name. Katie's probably, Irving, you know, the big Irving gas stations with the diners and all the truckers that are there. So they're sitting in kind of an Irving kind of diner having breakfast. And so that's the beginning of this scene. So Kay said again, oh, and I'm jumping in the middle of the chapter, not at the very beginning. So Kay said again, here's the plan. She pushed a slip of paper across the table toward me. The plan? We already had a plan. David had sent the itinerary to me by email several days ago. It was beautiful and excruciating in its detail. How many miles to cover each day, what hotel to stop at each night, with a list of the amenities and nearby restaurants for meals. He had helpfully included a handful of sightseeing pit stops along the way that he felt might interest his mother, since she insisted on driving for the sightseeing, he'd written. Though, to be honest, I wasn't sure there was time for any of them to fit into his precision schedule. But I started. Yes, I know. David's very important itinerary, she said, her fingers waggling air quotes while she rolled her eyes. There's some things I'd like to do, things that aren't on my son's list. But yes, I know. You feel like David is your boss and he's told you what to do and you ought to do it. But I'm your boss, actually. But I stammered a third time, beginning to feel like an idiot. I'm your boss and your friend she said, her defiant stare flickering, then a hesitation creeping into her eyes. And this is important to me. She looked down at her hands. Her fingers were interlaced, and I could see she was gripping them tightly, worrying. Just read it, please. I set the menu aside and picked up the paper. Old school yellow lined paper. At the top, in pencil, road trip checklist. That was underlined twice. Then below it, a numbered list. I'm going to skip over the numbered list so you don't know where they're going. Number 2 was already crossed off, a single line through it. The last one was empty, as though leaving room to add new ideas. Some items were so small and minor that it seemed silly to list them at all. Others were going to be a little more challenging, if not impossible. And it would take a heck of a lot longer than David's very important itinerary would allow. Kay, I started, but then stopped, looking at the list again. Look, she said, I want to tell you it's not up to you, that I'm the boss and here's how it's going to be. But we have to be partners in this. And I know that David wants you to get me there in exactly 8.75 days or whatever it is he's determined it should take. But I've agreed to go, and I think I get some say in how. She took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. Why, I started, not sure if I wanted to ask why she was going in the first place or why she wanted to do the things on the list or why she wasn't good at insisting or some other why altogether. She shook her head and held up her hand. Let's just drive and see how it goes, she said, motioning to the list. We can get as many as possible. We'll fit them in. We'll tell David I get tired easily from the driving, that it's taking longer than you thought. Lord knows he'll believe it. He thinks I'm on death's doorstep as it is. I frowned. Is there something you need to get back sooner for? Her face was the picture of innocence. No, but my eyes darted back to the list. Get drunk, have sex, visit the cottage. What cottage? And steal something? It was equal parts sightseeing tour and sin-seeking with a dash down memory lane. She took the list back from me, laid it flat on the table, and smoothed her hand across it, fingers trailing over the wrinkled paper. Please, Ruthie. I took a deep breath. She didn't want to be doing this any more than I did. But here we were, 2 boats bobbing together on a big empty ocean, pushed together by currents we couldn't control. Would we let the tide take us where it would? Or should we put up the sail and decide where we were heading ourselves? I held my hands out for the paper, and she handed it back. I looked over it one more time, nodded. Okay, we're doing it. Kay beamed, and I swear she bounced and wiggled in her seat. I'd just figure out how to tell David later, much, much later. I got as far as the parking lot before David called. So that's the end of that section. So those are the only 2 readings that we're going to do tonight. And JJ's back. So if we have some questions, we can do those. And I'll just quickly say, if somebody has to head out, I know it's sort of kid bedtime. Feel free to do so. We won't be hurt or anything like that. Katie, you should read the dolphin scene. Everybody wants the dolphin scene. I thought about it. But yeah, if we have some questions, I'm happy to chat for a bit if something has come up down there.
There's a question from Ruth here about the age difference between, I'll read it. How about that?
Sure.
Why were you drawn to, or were you drawn to the depicting of friendship with an age difference between the 2 women characters? Was that something that you chose deliberately, or did that arise out of some other mysterious way through the writing process? I mean, I think we talked a little bit about it, but I am quite fascinated by that particular relationship and it being an engine for what's going on in the story.
I think it arose out of my own life. I think I've been really, really lucky throughout my life to have had a lot of friendships with women who were older than me when I was young. You know, probably the first one was my mom, and still sort of one of my best friends. And then even in my teen years, I was sort of working full time at places that were mostly full of grown-ups, and became very close friends with older women there. And they treated me like I was a peer, like I was a counterpart. And I learned so much from those women over the years. And that experience has replicated itself sort of over and over again in my life many, many times. I seem to end up in, in my newspaper career, we had probably the most woman-heavy newsroom in the entire Lower Mainland, I think. And many of them, I was younger than them, and they were always, sharing and teaching and letting me sort of come up under them. And that has continued since then too. So I think my appreciation for sort of that intergenerational friendship probably arose out of that. And that as I've gotten older and I've shifted from one stage to another and really started to recognize how we we sort of look down on our own aging process so much, women especially, and that we're so quick to dismiss ourselves as we get older. And now I'm kind of in between those stages, right? You think maiden, mother, crone, and I was a maiden, and now I'm a mother, and my crone stage is coming, and now I have friends that are younger than me, and so maybe I get to replicate that backwards, and so we learn from each other. And I think that is probably where that piece came from in the book, is that those kinds of friendships that are life-changing and lead you in new directions and end up becoming second chances of their own really have happened in my life a lot of times. So yeah.
I think that segues nicely into Sarah's question. She talked about, the Kay, Ruthie dyad and their characteristics, and some of it you already answered, but she did made an extra part to the question, which parts of their character were the most fun to explore between Kay and Ruthie, and the one, especially the ones that you relate to, those characteristics.
Yeah.
What did you find that it's rather revealing in some ways because you get
Well, that's a great question. I think one of the most fun parts for me writing was their parallel and uneven approach to sort of their own sexuality, right? Where Kay is older and she's clearly much more experienced in life and much more comfortable with things. There's a scene in a sex toy shop that we referenced earlier, and Kay is just she's wandering around having a great time, and Ruthie is quite flustered, but then she's also embarrassed by her own flusterment. That's not a word, but she's embarrassed by her. She knows that she's being a little bit of a prude, and she knows that she's a little bit bound up by sort of society's sort of expectations of her. And that, there's a scene early on with her best friend where they sort of come to heads over the best friend's sort of casual approach to sex and relationships. And Ruthie sort of resents her for it. She implies that her best friend is not making the best choices, but really she's not making the best choices, and she resents her friend for being comfortable with her own sexual life. So I think that was one of the most fun parts, was flipping that script that we have about young women are going to be so sexually open and excited and do everything, and older women are not sexual at all. And I love the fact that, of the two of them, Kay has, again, I don't want to give things away, but Kay has a pretty exciting trip ahead of her. And things happen for Kay that in a lot of books, I think, happen to the young character, and the older character is sort of just the tag along who goes, "Oh, lucky you," right? So I think that would be my favorite part of that. Yeah.
So, sorry, I was just toggling from the questions to the
okay.
to the mute button. Well, it occurs to me, and I think this might be a question, like there seems to be quite a few central mysteries in the novel, but more importantly, that those central mysteries point at that how to be in the world, like that Ruthie is really questioning, and so Kay becomes a sort of foil for her. Is that how? But it's not. It's reciprocal, though, is it not?
Yeah, I think so. I think that what's the right way to answer that? I think the mystery of life is the thing that we can't get away from. And a lot of our turmoil is over trying to control that, which is sort of what Ruthie is always trying to do. And then she gets caught up trying to control secrets, and she can't. And she gets caught up trying to make things happen the way that she wants them to happen, and she can't do that either, right? And there's something about sort of leaning into the unknown, and that will lead you somewhere, right? We spend so much time trying to control what's going to happen next and when we should do things and how it should work out. And Kay has long since figured out that's not how life works. Tragedy happens upon you when you're walking down the street and a car goes the wrong way, or a misunderstood word that turns a conversation into an argument and people go in two different directions, right? And so, yeah, they are foils in that way, because Ruthie's still very much in the I can figure this out and can control this. And Kay has, I think, much more welcomed the reality that life is a mystery. Yeah, there are sort of these central, there's secrets in the story that unfold. And that allows them, I think, mutually to understand, for Kay to understand that there's still the chance for a second chance, and for Ruthie to understand that there's a second chance, but in very different ways, I think. So
Wow. No, thank you.
That's a
Thank you.
little bit of a
No,
complicated answer.
thank you for your thematic answers there. I think we might have to, just in case we start treading into some of the incredible twists that occur and surprises that are available in the novel. I don't want to get into that territory. So we're going to pivot a little to the questions now that really address the writing process.
Sure.
From Janet, we have, it does occur to me too, because of the map-like nature of the journey. Like you could really, imagine the movement through space. Was there a research component to writing this novel? Especially, you talk about Ruthie's hometown. It's like, I wonder if Christina knows that exact hairdresser. Like, so what was the research like to do a road trip specifically?
Well, first I'll say Ruthie's hometown, shout out to my cousin Jamie, who I think is online right now, who lives in that town, which is the town that my mom was born in. And so, that town is a real place, and it is where my mom came from. So the research component starts, again, like the female friendships years ago in my own childhood. We lived in Alberta, we lived in Ontario, we moved back and forth several times, not just once. And our holidays when we were kids was not flying to Hawaii, it was driving across the country. So we've been sort of PEI to Vancouver and back 8 bajillion times. It feels like I've done portions of that as an adult as well. So some of the research was just knowledge. And then all these places appear in the book that are places I've been. So Shawville and the little hair shop, actually, my other cousin owns a hair shop. Now it's not in Shawville. I took some creative license there. I moved it to Shawville, but that is actually my cousin and I used her name. And the stop at Hopewell Rocks was reflective of a stop that my sister and I did there. And actually the scene is quite close to what it was like when my sister and I went there. So a lot of that research piece was just places I've been through my own travels. And then thank goodness for Google Maps, because it's been years since I've driven, say, Sudbury to wherever they went on the next stop. And so I just, as I was going, I was plotting it out on Google Maps. Okay, that distance is an 8-hour drive in decent traffic. Could they reasonably do that in a day? And at the end of the novel, I had to go back and I just created a map going sort of step by step, making sure that it was realistic. And I guarantee there are pieces in the story where someone's going to go, that does not quite make sense. I live there. That does, actually my mom noted one. I referenced the lake when they get to the cottage. It's not actually a lake. It's a bay off the Ottawa River. And, so there's some, I'm going to call those a creative license, not a mistake, not a research mistake. But yeah, so there was sort of a combination of I was really fearful that the book would go out and somebody would say, that's ridiculous that these people drove from this place to this place in one day. So I plotted it. There might yet be an error. Let me know if somebody spots it. But so that was most of the research was that piece. So yeah. Oh, you're muted. I can't hear you.
Oh, thank you for doing that, Malika. So I'm just going to open the questions again. We're down to our last few minutes. It would seem to me for the formal part. I'm sure people that want to hang out with us are welcome to and to continue this conversation. But I just wanted to draw one final question from the writer's pile. And as you write, do your characters do things you didn't expect? Do they start writing their own story?
Yes and no. This project sort of, I don't want to sound wacky about it, but it sort of came quite wholesale into my brain all in one sort of chunk. And I sort of knew what they were going to do and plotted it and outlined it like in a day. Like I sort of knew what they were going to do. I knew the last scene before. That's a totally unique experience for me. I've never written that way before. And I'm currently working on 2, knock on wood, hopefully next novels. Are quite different. And one is a little bit outlined, but the characters are doing things that I wasn't expecting. And then I'm getting irritated because it's going off outline. And the other one is 100% like chapter 1, let's just start it. And by the end of chapter 1, oh, this character actually needs to go to the next town over to figure something out. And I have no idea where that's going to go. I mean, I have, you have those general big pictures. So I think it maybe depends on the characters. It depends on the story. It depends on what the topic is. So I'm writing one right now that has a little bit of a natural event type apocalypse sort of base to the story. And so sometimes that involves quite a bit of research, which thankfully there is out in the world for this particular type of event. And so that sometimes involves going back and going, oh, the character can't do that because that wouldn't happen that way. So I think the answer is both, depending on the project. I don't think I don't think I'm good at doing it only one way or the other. So,
well, thank you, Christina. I mean, congratulations on the novel. Now we're in that period where we plan to stop the show, if that makes any sense. But I'm sure there are people who want to chat with you directly. I don't know if we should do it to the ask a question or if you would prefer to do the chat window. But I thought we might create another window if people need to sign off or say to talk. Maybe you want to say a few last words to
I'll do that.
People who want to go.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. As I said, sort of halfway through, thank you so much to everybody who's here, and huge thank you to Caitlin Press for supporting this project, and JJ for being here. It just feels so lovely. It feels like sort of a circle from our time together. And I've been sort of, when I could, watching the comments in the chat, and I just appreciate everybody's support so much. It means the world to me. And if anybody has to head off now, feel free to do that. Why don't we say we'll hang out till sort of maybe 7:25, 7:30. If nobody asks questions, we can head out. That'll be fine. We can head out right away. But if you have questions, throw them in the chat, because I do have the chat up now. Don't worry about the ask a question. And then I can look at them from right there. And Ruth, this project, this is a book. I know I keep calling things projects, like they're sort of still in creation mode.
They're published. It's already published, for God's sake.
Sorry. But thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And a quick reminder, you can get it at all your independent local booksellers. People are from all over. Western Sky Books has been my partner. So please check them out. If you're kind of way on the other side of the country, check out your local independent seller if you can. Also, major retailers are available there too. I'll just sort of hang out on the screen for a minute. If there's any questions, I can answer those.
Oh, there's some lovely comments from very familiar names. It's Candy. It's so lovely. It's so sweet. Thank you, Barbara. Well, since we're here and we're together, I wanted, you were kind of, you were excited, but I always felt that the novel part was really, like, you were taking all the steps that you were taking and you're doing great things in all your projects. But I thought, maybe I'm projecting, but I always felt that the writing the novel and getting a novel out there was a major, important, not a career thing. It was a heart thing. Can you speak more about, I just really want to know what it feels like for you to clear this one, to get this one out there.
You total nail on the head. It really, really did. Because I felt like there was, I think one of the things we do early on when we sort of decide that we're going to be writers is we feel like we have to decide what kind of writer we're going to be. Like, am I a sci-fi writer? Am I a serious literary can-lit writer? Where is my spot? Where am I going to fit? And I definitely felt like I hammered myself with that for a while. Like, I had to be one kind of writer, and a lot of my work was very revealing. It was often very emotionally tough. I was often dealing with sort of tough topics around, postpartum depression, family stuff or body image, all of these different things. And I could feel I was sort of coming into a little pigeonhole there, and I liked that people recognized me for that kind of writing. But I also didn't want to be stuck in sort of one little spot. So when the book sort of came kind of wholesale in one chunk into my brain, I thought, you got to run with this. Like, I don't know if I've ever sort of popped out of bed and done this as quickly as I did that time, because it felt like I needed to do it. The story was there and I needed to do it, and it was important to me, but also that it would be a way to stretch my legs and to not be kind of one box. And it's worked, because now, like I said, I'm working on 2 different books right now, and one is like middle grade and one is sort of a slightly speculative kind of end of the world thing. I wouldn't have done that 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I would have felt like I had to stick in one thing. So yeah.
Well, that's cool. No, that's great. I mean, I'm really happy that it's just a nice thing to check off the list, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's so pretty. It's so pretty.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's
so
beautiful
that they designed this. And, I sent them some ideas of kind of my vision, and then they made this thing that was 10 times more beautiful. So I just saw a question in the chat come up. Janet asked, tossing a question here, do you feel comfortable sharing something you edited out of this book?
I think that's a good one.
Yeah, sure. Actually, there's one that it'll sound like a sort of small thing. It was a thing that came up with John Gold. John Gold actually just published his most recent book. It was a collection of short stories about 6 months ago, I want to say. He's a writer out of Victoria and did a great job working with me on it. And so the scene that I read where she starts crying, that's sort of the first place in the book where she starts crying, and she's sort of stalwart before that. But in the original version, she'd cried like a dozen times. She'd cried sort of over and over again. And he had sort of said, like, it's more important when she really breaks down and she lets her friend comfort her when it's a new thing, right? If she's sort of been suppressing this with alcohol and she's been sort of, kind of a jerk to herself. And that sounds like a small thing, but it really changed the character because before that, she was sort of wishy-washy and kind of wimpy. And as soon as I took those pieces out and went, no, she's sort of going to be she's got a little bit more of a backbone here. And not that it wasn't a real backbone, right? It's a fake backbone. Because she's trying not to cry in all those other moments. So it actually, I think the book actually ended up much shorter than the original. It's not a crazy long book. It's a pretty quick read. But the things that we took out were things like that sort of made the characters less distinct, that sort of wishy-washied them out. So that's a small thing, but I thought it was a powerful suggestion on his part. And he had so many of those sort of like, have you noticed that you do this a lot? And then I'd go, oh yeah, I do that.
It's sort of like the crying bullet, right? That's a bullet that if you spend it, you don't get to use it again, right? And so it's like, unsaved. Her crying scenes are really important now. Like, and you save it for when it's a showstopper, and it is. The reading was a showstopper, and it laid the groundwork for all the decisions that she makes to get her in the situation that she gets herself in.
Exactly.
So it's brilliant. I love the choice that you made there. I'm sorry, I lost track of the chat because I can't unmute and look at the chat at the same time. So I'm going to open the chat again and take a boo. I know you're on it too.
I saw Ruth ask something. You're a former journalist and nonfiction writer, now a fiction. And there's that lovely about the word penultimate from Kay and Desire lines. Oh yeah, there's some little bit poetic in there. I can't call myself a poet yet, but maybe someday. How does metaphor fit into your creative practice? Do you draw inspiration from poetry, and where else do you go to feed your own creative work? I would say 100% not 100%, but the place that I best feed creative inspiration is absolutely from other writers. I think that was one of the really tough things about this year, was losing those spaces where I could go to Cottage Bistro and listen to whoever were the new crop of students at TWS reading, and being able to hear other people use words in new ways and in new forms. And sort of, it's almost like every time I hear somebody do something new, it's permission for me to do the same. Like I go, oh, this is the box that I write in. And then I hear somebody do something and I go, oh, that's so cool. I can do those. I can break rules. I can change things. Right. So I think most of my inspiration comes from other writers, also in the sense that you can commiserate with other writers and you go, oh yeah, this has been a terrible week. I was going to write 6,000 words and I planted a hosta and that's all that happened this week. So I think that's the biggest part. And especially being a parent with two young kids, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I probably would have said reading all the time was my big inspiration, but there isn't always the time to read when you have little ones. And so, yeah, people, I think, is my big inspiration. So yeah, that's the answer.
No, that's a great one. And indeed. Okay.
That might be all the questions.
Thank you.
So that's maybe a good one to end on, I think. So
yeah. No, this is great. Thank you very much. And we're going to do the official sign off. I guess we'll regroup in the green room if that's okay with Malika.
So yeah.
So if I may, I just want, if you don't mind, I'll on your behalf, I'll thank everyone for coming. And it's lovely to see so many friends of Christina here and family, of course, but also for me, the overlapping writing family that's here. It's just lovely to see people that I'm familiar with too. And congratulations. And thank you very much. A virtual applause for Christina Myers, everybody.
Thank you so much. I know everybody's doing a little cheer or something for me, and I really appreciate it. So thank you. And thank you, JJ,
Thank you
for being here with us. So
all right.
awesome.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much. And hopefully I'll see you in the green room in just a second.
I think so.